we can do as the interparliamentary.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching World of Sports on NewsX World. We'll start with a look at some of the top stories of this week. New Zealand clinched their first one-day international series win in India with a 41-run victory in the deciding third match. Novak Djokovic creates history, clinches 100 career wins at Australian Open at Melbourne Park as he beats Pedro Martinez in first round of 2026 Grand Slam. Senegal beat Morocco to win the Africa Cup of Nations for a second time, but only after the win final was overshadowed when they temporarily refused to play after the hosts were awarded a stoppage time penalty with the match goalless. Haas have finally become the first team to reveal the look of their new Formula One car for a season in which the sport is introducing its biggest rule change for decades. Nacho Elvira clinched the Dubai International Invitational title after a dramatic final round, capitalizing on Shane Lowry's mistake on the 18th. Elvira finished strong to secure victory. Now turning focus to our top story this week, multi-club ownership groups in football. Now, football is undergoing a major transformation as a multi-club ownership or MCO reshapes the sports landscape. No longer are teams isolated, they now function as interconnected parts of a larger footballing empire with shared resources, strategies and even players. Take Manchester City, Girona and Bahia for example. Under the same ownership, these clubs operate like one cohesive unit. Red Bull's network connects Salzburg, Leipzig and New York Red Bulls, all working together to develop talent, grow brands and make global deals. This is the power of MCO, creating a footballing powerhouse across multiple continents. But how does it actually work? In an MCO setup, multiple clubs are owned by the same entity or individual. The goal is shared resources, strategic development and financial synergies. For example, Red Bull's development system has seen players like Dio Upamecano and move from Salzburg to Leipzig and eventually to Bayern Munich for €42.5 million. What began as a small investment in Austria has grown into a global success. One of the major advantages of MCO is the ability to create talent pipelines. By acquiring smaller clubs in peripheral leagues, owners can scout and develop players in a structured system, providing a steady flow of talent. Another key benefit is the commercial power MCOs wield. Global sponsorship deals like the $860 million Puma agreement with City Football Group apply across multiple clubs in the portfolio, increasing the negotiating power and brand reach. Moreover, data-driven decision-making plays a huge role. Clubs within an MCO share valuable data, scouting networks and analytical tools, helping them perform better and establish a unified team identity. Red Bull clubs, for instance, all follow a high press, aggressive playing style aided by shared sports science methodologies. The rise of MCO has been staggering. In 2012, only 8 groups existed. By 2023, that number has skyrocketed to over 120, with more than 300 clubs now under MCOs. Investors see these clubs as valuable assets, increasing club valuations, expanding brand reach, and generating revenue from media rights, sponsorships, and player trades. However, MCO is not without its risks and ethical concerns. These have led to protests in several countries, with fans voicing their discontent. In England, for example, Manchester City's ownership group, City Football Group, has faced criticism from supporters who feel that their club is becoming just another piece in a larger corporate empire, sidelining local fan interests. Similarly, in France, the influence of the City Football Group over clubs like Troyes has sparked concerns about the competitive integrity of French football. Fans argue the MCO could create a feeder club mentality where small clubs merely exist to serve the interests of the bigger teams in the network. In Germany, where fan ownership models are more prominent, there has been significant pushback against MCOs. Clubs like RB Leipzig, owned by Red Bull, have faced fierce protests due to the perceived threat of traditional fan-driven models and the fear that football is being commercialized beyond recognition. Critics argue that MCOs threaten the very essence of what football should be about: competition, community, and the authenticity of the sport. These protests highlight the growing divide between traditional football fans and the corporate-driven approach of the MCOs. As the model expands, questions about competitive integrity, fan loyalty, and ethical concerns continue to grow louder. The landscape of football is changing and MCO is leading the way, but as we've seen, the debate over its impact on the game's heart and soul is far from over. Stay tuned for more updates as this exciting evolution unfolds. I now invite Kiran Maguire, lecturer of football finance at the University of Liverpool, into this discussion. Thanks, Kiran, for joining me in this discussion. It's a pleasure to have you on NewsX World.
Thank you for the invite. It should be fun.
Sure. So how do you see the multi-club ownership groups effectively manage and integrate multiple clubs across different leagues, and what are the key operational strategies used to align these clubs under a single vision?
As far as the investors are concerned, it allows them to de-risk their investment in football. If you don't qualify for a European competition such as the Champions League, there's serious financial repercussions. If you have 2 or 3 clubs within your MCO that are all trying to achieve the heights, then that's likely to reduce the risk of any one of them having a bad season, that having a detrimental financial impact. You mentioned synergies in your introduction, and there's both revenue synergies and cost synergies to be achieved. You can go to sponsors and offer them a global product. You can have just one HR department, one IT department across the whole of the MCO, and this is a way of spreading costs and also allocating profits to perhaps those clubs who are under potential constraints due to cost control rules operating in their domestic environment.
All right, Kiran, in your opinion, what specific economic, technological, and strategic factors have driven the exponential growth of these multi-club ownership in recent years? And how has the business model evolved from a niche concept to a dominant trend in global football?
Well, I think I'm based in the UK, as you'll be aware. As a result of Brexit, it meant that clubs couldn't recruit players from Europe and beyond ages 16 and 17. So therefore, quite a few Premier League clubs, they bought clubs in Europe. That allowed them to stockpile talent in the European part of the MCO until they reached the age of 18, and then they could come to the Premier League. So that's one environment. That's one example. Also, if you've got a player who you think might be at the standard in 2 or 3 years' time to play at the elite level, whether that's in La Liga or Bundesliga or Premier League, if you have an MCO, what you can do is that you can bring that player to one of the satellite clubs, and there's normally a controlling club or a head club in any MCO, and that would allow the player to develop on an individual basis, but they'd be given the same diet, they be given the same technical and tactical skills and policies which are being employed by the group as a whole. So therefore, when that player they feel is fit to move to the senior club, they have less to learn. So it can be used as a stepping stone as far as player development is concerned, and that's beneficial as far as the overall group is concerned. That player's value increases, and therefore potentially you've got a higher sale price.
Let's then talk about the ethical dilemmas. What are the main dilemmas and competitive integrity issues that are raised by MCO, and particularly in scenarios where multiple clubs owned by the same entity compete against one another in major tournaments like the UEFA Champions League, and how should these concerns be addressed?
Well, if we take a look at what's happened under UEFA, you're not allowed to have two or more clubs which have the same senior ownership. So therefore what you have to do is you normally put one of those clubs into a blind trust, which means that the parent club has no influence over the tactical, the technical, the decisions in terms of which players and which tactics are employed for individual matches, because what you don't want is a repeat of some things that we have seen in European football historically, whereby you might have two clubs potentially with an MCO where one club needs to win the last match 2-0 to qualify for the next round, and they very conveniently win to that effect. So the governing authorities are taking steps to try to prove independence. There's an awful lot of money coming into football from a huge number of different stakeholders, and one of the attractions of football is the idea of jeopardy, is the idea of uncertainty, and you need integrity for that. So therefore, as far as the MCO is concerned, it's got to be seen to be wholly independent of the club that it's facing on an individual 90 minutes match.
Sure. Kiran, before I let you go, another question. How are protests against multi-club ownership in England, France and Germany specifically challenging the legitimacy of the model, particularly in relation to accusations of undermining local fan culture and distorting competitive integrity, and also prioritizing corporate interests over traditional football values?
Well, certainly investors and what you might call legacy fans are key stakeholders within football all over the world. We often say that football's the most important of the unimportant things in life, and apart from your family, for many football fans, that's how they identify themselves. That's the most important thing that they focus on a week-to-week basis. So therefore, it is important that the club that you go to see is seen as being part of the local history, culture, independence, and heritage of that individual town or city. And there's a danger of that being diluted if you are just seen as being part of a much vaster conglomerate. Manchester City, or rather the City Football Group, did try to acquire a club in the Netherlands, for example, called NAC Breda, and they had to pull out of that. Such was the extent of the opposition. We're seeing issues between Chelsea and Strasbourg, where the Strasbourg fans feel that they are the poor relations of the Chelsea group, and that's caused some issues as well. So I think the MCOs have to be very careful that they do not disrupt those integral parts of history and heritage and culture that exist within individual clubs, because they risk alienating the fans. Or, as you rightly pointed out, there have been protests, and football fans can make those protests quite vocal and quite visual as well.
Sure. Thanks then, Professor Kiran Maguire, for joining me in this discussion at NewsX World of Sports. And now moving ahead, viewers. Senegal have secured their second Africa Cup of Nations title with a 1-0 win over Morocco, but not before a dramatic and controversial incident. The final, which had been goalless, was temporarily halted after referee Jean-Jacques Ndala awarded Morocco a stoppage time penalty following a VAR review. Furious with the decision, Senegal's coach Pape Thiaw ordered his players off the field, resulting in a 17-minute delay. Despite the tension, the match resumed and Real Madrid's Brahim Diaz missed the penalty with a time Panenka that was easily saved by Senegal's keeper Edouard Mendy. In extra time, Pape Gueye scored the decisive goal, securing Senegal's victory. The incident, however, has sparked outrage. Morocco's coach, Walid Regragui, described Senegal's actions as shameful, while FIFA President Gianni Infantino condemned the ugly scenes and called for appropriate disciplinary measures. Thiaw later apologized for his actions, acknowledging that the team should have returned to the pitch sooner. While Senegal's victory was historic, the final was marred by controversy, raising questions about the integrity of the game. And now on to cricket. New Zealand have created a history in India, clinching their first ever one-day international series win on Indian soil with a 41-run victory in the decider at Indore. Batting first, the Black Caps recovered from early trouble at 58 for 3 thanks to a match-defining partnership between Daryl Mitchell and Glenn Phillips. The duo added 219 runs, completely shifting momentum to New Zealand's way. Mitchell was outstanding once again, scoring a career-best 137, following knocks of 84 and 131 earlier in the series. Phillips chipped in with a fluent 106 before being dismissed by Arshdeep Singh. Late runs from captain Michael Bracewell helped New Zealand post a commanding 337 for 8. India fought back through Virat Kohli, who struck a brilliant 124, his record extending 54th ODI century. However, wickets at crucial moments proved costly. Zak Fulkus removed Harshit Rana and Mohammad Siraj in successive deliveries, and Kohli was later caught by Mitchell at long off. India were bowled out for 296, handing New Zealand a memorable 2-1 series victory. Let's now track some tennis news. Now, tensions are rising at the Australian Open as top tennis players and their agents push for a larger share of the tournament's revenue. Over the past 3 days in Melbourne, player representatives, including stars like Coco Gauff, Alex de Minaur and Carlos Alcaraz, held private meetings to escalate their campaign for better pay and conditions. Despite a 16% prize money increase this year, players argue it still represents less than 22% of the Australian Open's overall revenue, well below the 22% they're demanding. The players are also calling for Grand Slams to contribute to a welfare fund for pensions, healthcare and maternity benefits. While Tennis Australia insists that their prize pool has increased significantly, some players feel the progress isn't enough and are now threatening further action. The players, backed by former WTA chairman Larry Scott, are pushing for a more equitable deal as the tournament continues to draw record crowds. Tennis Australia CEO Craig Tilley, however, defends the figure, saying much of the revenue is from other events and divisions, and insists that players are happy with the current agreement. But with mounting frustration, the player revolt continues to gain momentum. And viewers, that's a wrap on this episode of the World of Sports. Stay tuned to NewsX World as we continue to bring you all international news and updates and stories from the world of sports.